The rain tapped against the cafe window like tiny fingers trying to get in. Inside, the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the sound of quiet conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine. It was the kind of place where people came to escape, to think, or sometimes just to sit and pretend everything was okay. At a corner table, far from everyone else, sat a man who looked completely out of place. His suit probably cost more than most people made in a month. The watch on his wrist could have bought a small car. But none of that mattered right now. His shoulders were slumped forward, his expensive phone face down on the table, and his coffee sat untouched, slowly getting cold. His name was David, and if you'd asked anyone in the business world, they would have told you he had everything. He was the CEO of a tech company that had changed how millions of people communicated. His face had been on magazine covers. He'd given speeches at conferences where people hung on his every word. He had money, power, and success that most people only dreamed about. But sitting there in that cafe, with rain drumming outside and the world moving on without him, David felt like he had nothing at all. The morning had started like any other terrible day in what had become a terrible few months. He'd woken up in his empty apartment, the kind of place that real estate agents called luxury, but that always felt cold no matter how high he turned up the heat. The silence was the worst part. It reminded him that he lived alone now. He'd gotten dressed on autopilot, the same routine he'd done for 20 years. Shower, shave, suit, tie. Look in the mirror and pretend you're fine. Check your phone and see 100 things demanding your attention. Ignore the things that actually matter. But today was different. Today he couldn't ignore it anymore. The envelope had been sitting on his kitchen counter for 3 days. He'd been avoiding it, walking past it, pretending it wasn't there. But this morning he'd finally opened it. Inside were the divorce papers, all signed and official. 20 years of marriage over. Just like that. A relationship reduced to legal documents and a judge's signature. His ex-wife had written a note. He'd read it 5 times, and each time the words hit harder. You were never really here, even when you were home. I waited for you to choose us. You never did. I hope whatever you were chasing was worth it. He'd sat down at his kitchen table and tried to remember the last time he'd actually talked to his wife. Really talked. Not just quick conversations about schedules or bills. He couldn't remember. The realization made him feel sick. Then there was his daughter, 16 years old, and they were basically strangers now. She used to run to the door when he came home from work. Back when she was little, she'd tell him about her day, show him drawings, ask him to read her stories. When had that stopped? When had she stopped trying? He'd called her 3 times last week. She hadn't answered once. He'd sent texts. Nothing. His ex-wife told him their daughter was hurt, angry, tired of being disappointed. She had a piano recital last month, his ex-wife had said. She asked if you'd come. Do you even remember? He didn't remember. He'd been in meetings that day. Important meetings. Or at least that's what he told himself. Now he couldn't even remember what those meetings had been about. The worst part was his father. That wound was still so fresh it felt like it had happened yesterday. Even though it had been a year. His father had been sick for months. The doctors had said it was serious, that the family should spend time with him while they could. David had meant to visit. He really had. But there was always something at work that needed his attention. A crisis to manage. A deal to close. A fire to put out. His sister had called him on a Tuesday afternoon. You need to come now, she'd said, her voice tight with emotion. The doctors say it's time. He'd been in the middle of a merger negotiation. Months of work were coming together. His team needed him. The investors were waiting. He'd told his sister he'd get there as soon as he could. He'd promised. His father died that evening. David had been on a conference call when it happened. He'd gone to the funeral, of course. But he'd left early to catch a flight. His sister hadn't spoken to him since. His mother looked at him with disappointment in her eyes that hurt worse than any words could. Sitting in the cafe now, David felt the weight of it all crushing down on him. Every choice he'd made, every priority he'd set, every time he'd said, I'll do it later, or this is more important, it had all led here. To this moment. Alone in a cafe with a cold cup of coffee and a life that felt like it was falling apart. His phone buzzed on the table. He didn't even look at it. For once, he didn't care. The board meeting could wait. The investor calls could wait. All of it could wait. What was the point anymore? The truth was, the company didn't even want him anymore. He'd overheard the board members talking last week. They thought he'd burned out. They were worried about his judgment. There was talk of voting him out, of bringing in someone new. The thing he'd sacrificed everything for was about to kick him to the curb, and maybe they were right. Maybe he had burned out. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt excited about work. It had become automatic, joyless. Wake up, go through the motions, ignore everything else, go to sleep, repeat. He stared out the window at the rain. People hurried past with umbrellas, going somewhere, doing something. They all seemed to have purpose. What was his purpose now? The cafe door chimed as someone came in, bringing a gust of wet air with them. David barely noticed. He was lost in his own head, replaying every mistake, every missed moment, every time he'd chosen wrong. "Are you okay, mister?" The voice was small and clear, cutting through his thoughts like a bell. David looked up, startled. Standing next to his table was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. She wore a bright yellow raincoat with a hood, and her backpack was covered in cartoon characters. Her hair was pulled back in 2 ponytails, and her sneakers lit up when she shifted her weight from foot to foot. But it was her eyes that caught him. They were looking right at him with genuine concern, the kind of straightforward honesty that only kids had. No judgment, no agenda, just a simple question that no one had asked him in longer than he could remember. David started, then stopped. His throat felt tight. "I'm fine, sweetheart." "Thank you." The little girl tilted her head to one side, studying him. She didn't look convinced. "You don't look fine," she said matter-of-factly. "You look sad. Like really, really sad." David felt something crack inside his chest. This child, this complete stranger, had seen in 10 seconds what everyone else had missed for months. Or maybe they'd seen it and just hadn't cared enough to ask. "I'm just having a tough day," he managed to say. "Oh." The girl nodded seriously, like she understood completely. "I have those too. Last week I lost my favorite stuffed animal and I cried for a whole hour. My mom says it's okay to be sad sometimes." David found himself almost smiling despite everything. "Your mom sounds smart." "She is," the girl agreed. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into her raincoat pocket and pulled out a piece of paper. It was crumpled and a little wet from the rain, covered in crayon drawings. A rainbow arced across the top. Below it were stick figures holding hands. A big yellow sun smiled in the corner. "Here," she said, holding it out to him. "This is my happy picture. I drew it in school. It makes me feel better when I'm sad. You can have it." David stared at the drawing. His vision blurred. He couldn't remember the last time someone had given him something without wanting anything in return. No conditions, no expectations, no hidden agenda. Just a kid trying to help because she saw someone hurting. "I can't take your drawing," he said, his voice rough. "It's okay. I can make more. I'm really good at drawing." She pushed it closer to him. "Take it, it'll help. Lily!" "Come here, honey." "Leave that man alone," a woman's voice called from the counter. The girl's mother was balancing 2 cups of hot chocolate and looking apologetic. The little girl, Lily, turned and waved. "I gotta go," she said to David, "but keep the picture, okay? And remember, it's okay to be sad. My mom says tomorrow is always a new day." She smiled at him, a gap-toothed grin that lit up her whole face, and then skipped back to her mother. David watched her go, this small person who'd just shown him more kindness than he'd felt in months. He looked down at the drawing in his hands. The paper was soft from being folded and unfolded, carried around in a pocket. The rainbow was made of every color, layered thick with crayon. The stick figures all had big smiles. The sun had rays shooting out in every direction. And then, for the first time in longer than he could remember, David cried. Not the kind of crying he could hold back or hide. Real crying. The kind that came from somewhere deep inside, from all the pain and regret and loneliness he'd been pushing down for so long. His shoulders shook. Tears ran down his face and dripped onto the table. He didn't care who saw. He cried for his marriage that he'd let slip away, for his daughter who'd stopped believing he'd show up, for his father who'd died waiting for him, for the person he used to be before success became the only thing that mattered, for all the moments he'd missed that he could never get back. When he finally stopped, he felt empty in a different way. Not the hollow, aching emptiness of before. More like something heavy had been lifted off his chest, making room for something else. He didn't know what yet, but it was different. He carefully smoothed out the drawing, studying every detail. This little girl had seen him, really seen him and had reached out anyway. No fear, no hesitation, just kindness. David looked around the cafe. People were talking, laughing, living their lives. The rain was still falling outside. His coffee was definitely cold now, but something had shifted. Something small but important. He picked up his phone, but this time he didn't check his emails. Instead, he opened his contacts and scrolled to his daughter's name. His finger hovered over the call button. Maybe it was too late. Maybe she wouldn't answer. Maybe he'd destroyed too much to fix it now. But maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could be a new day. He pressed call and held the phone to his ear, his heart pounding. It rang once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, she answered. "Dad?" Her voice was cautious, surprised. David closed his eyes, clutching the rainbow drawing in his other hand. "Hi, sweetheart," he said, and his voice broke on the words. "I know I haven't been there. I know I've messed up. But I'm calling because I want to change that. If you'll let me." There was silence on the other end, long enough that David thought she might hang up. Then she spoke, her voice small and uncertain. "Really? Really," he promised. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." And somewhere in that cafe, with rain falling outside and a child's drawing in his hand, David took the first step toward finding his way back. The silence on the other end of the phone felt like it lasted forever. David could hear his daughter breathing, could almost feel her hesitation through the connection. His heart hammered in his chest as he waited, the rainbow drawing still clutched in his free hand like a lifeline. "I've heard that before, Dad." Her voice was quiet, careful, not quite cold but not warm either, guarded. "You always say you're going to change. You always say you'll be there. And then something comes up at work and—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. They both knew how it ended. David felt the words like a punch to the gut because they were true. He had said those things before. Promised to make her dance recital, then missed it for a client dinner. Sworn he'd be at her basketball game, then got stuck in a meeting. Told her they'd spend the weekend together, then flew to another city for an emergency presentation. "I know," he said, and his voice cracked. "I know I've let you down. Over and over. I know I don't deserve for you to believe me right now." He could hear her shifting on the other end, maybe sitting down. There were voices in the background. She was probably at home at her mother's house. The house that used to be his too. "Then why are you calling?" she asked. Not mean, just tired, like she'd run out of energy to be angry. David looked around the cafe. The little girl who'd given him the drawing was sitting at a table with her mother now, swinging her legs and sipping hot chocolate. She caught his eye and waved. He managed a small wave back. "Because something happened today that made me realize I've been living the wrong life," he said slowly. "I've been so focused on work, on success, on proving something to I don't even know who anymore, that I forgot about the things that actually matter. The people who actually matter." He heard her take a shaky breath. "Grandpa mattered," she said, and there was pain in her voice. "He asked about you all the time. Even when he was really sick, he kept saying you'd come visit soon. And you never did." The guilt hit him so hard he had to close his eyes. "I know. I needed you at the recital, Dad. I was so nervous and I kept looking for you in the audience. Mom said you probably got busy, but I knew you'd chosen work again. I'm sorry." The words felt so small, so inadequate. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Are you crying?" Her voice changed, surprise cutting through the hurt. David wiped his face with the back of his hand. Yeah, I am." Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "I don't think I've ever heard you cry before." "I haven't cried in about 20 years, he admitted. "I forgot how. Until today." "What happened today?" He looked at the drawing again. "A little girl at a cafe saw me sitting alone and asked if I was okay. No one's asked me that in so long. She gave me this drawing she made, said it would help me feel better. And something about that just broke something open inside me. Made me see how far I've drifted from everything real." His daughter was quiet for a moment. That was nice of her. It was. It really was. David took a breath. "Listen, I know I can't fix everything with one phone call. I know I've broken your trust too many times. But I want to try. Really try this time. Not because I'm supposed to, not because I feel guilty, but because I miss you. I miss who I was when you were little and I knew what mattered. I miss that too," she said quietly, and he could hear the tears in her voice now. "I miss having a dad." The words shattered something in him. I'm still here. I've been a terrible father, but I'm still here. And if you'll give me a chance, I want to show up. Actually show up. Not just say it. How do I know this time is different? It was a fair question. The most fair question she could ask. David looked out at the rain, watching it streak down the window. Honestly? You don't. I can't prove it with words. I can only prove it by doing it. But I'm asking you to give me the chance to try. He could hear her thinking, the silence stretching between them. Finally, she spoke. Mom's making dinner on Sunday. You could come if you want. But Dad, if you say you're coming and then you don't show up, I don't think I can forgive you again. I'll be there, he said immediately. What time? 6 o'clock. Don't be late. I won't, I promise. He paused. Thank you for giving me this chance. Don't thank me yet, she said. But there was something almost like hope in her voice. Just show up. I will. I love you, sweetheart. Another pause, shorter this time. Love you too, Dad. The line went dead. David sat there holding the phone, staring at it like it might disappear. His daughter had said she loved him. When was the last time he'd heard those words from her? Months? Longer? He carefully folded the drawing and put it in his jacket pocket right over his heart. Then he picked up his phone again and started scrolling through his calendar. The next few days were packed with meetings, calls, presentations. His whole life was in that calendar, color-coded and scheduled down to the minute. He started deleting. Meeting with the marketing team, deleted. Investor call, deleted. Conference presentation, deleted. One by one, he cleared his schedule for Sunday. Then he went further, blocking out the entire weekend. His assistant would have a heart attack when she saw it. But he didn't care. For the first time in his career, something else was more important than work. David paid for his coffee and stepped out into the rain. He'd left his umbrella somewhere, probably at the office, but he didn't care about that either. The rain felt good, cold and real against his skin. Washing things away, he walked instead of catching a cab. His apartment was 30 minutes away on foot, but he needed to move, needed to think. The city rushed past him, everyone hurrying to get out of the rain, and he walked right through it all. By the time he got home, he was soaked through. His expensive suit was ruined. His shoes were waterlogged. His hair dripped water onto the floor. He couldn't remember the last time he'd gotten caught in the rain like this. Couldn't remember the last time he'd walked anywhere without a purpose, without rushing to the next thing. He peeled off his wet clothes and stood in the shower, letting hot water run over him until his apartment's tank ran cold. When he got out, he caught sight of himself in the mirror. He looked different somehow. Older maybe, but also more awake. Like he'd been sleepwalking and had finally opened his eyes. His phone was buzzing from the bedroom. He'd left it on the nightstand and it had been going off constantly. He picked it up and saw the notifications. 52 emails, 15 missed calls, 23 text messages. All from work, all marked urgent. His finger hovered over the screen. Part of him, the part that had been trained for 20 years, wanted to start responding. To put out fires, to fix problems, to be indispensable. Instead, he put the phone down and walked away. He made himself dinner for the first time in months. Nothing fancy, just pasta and sauce from a jar, but it was something. He sat at his kitchen table and ate slowly, actually tasting the food. When was the last time he'd done that? Usually he ate at his desk, barely noticing what he was consuming, just fuel to keep going. After dinner, he did something he hadn't done in years. He pulled out an old box from the back of his closet. It was dusty, taped shut, labeled in handwriting that wasn't his. His ex-wife must have packed it during the separation. Inside were photo albums. He opened the first one and there they were. All the moments he'd forgotten about. His wedding day, both of them so young and full of hope. His daughter as a baby, tiny and perfect. First steps, first birthday, first day of school. Page after page of a life he'd lived but somehow stopped seeing. There were pictures of family vacations he barely remembered taking because he'd been on his phone the whole time. Photos from holidays where he looked happy but distant, already thinking about work. His daughter's gap-toothed smile in every picture, getting older as he flipped through, and then in the later photos the smile started to fade. She started looking at the camera instead of at him, standing next to him instead of hugging him. The most recent album had his father in it. He looked so alive in these pictures even though he'd only had a few years left. There he was at his daughter's 10th birthday party, laughing at something. There he was teaching her to ride a bike. There he was at a family barbecue, grilling hamburgers with that ridiculous apron that said, "Kiss the cook." David traced his finger over his father's face in the photo. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered. "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." He found a picture of all four of them together. Him, his ex-wife, his daughter, and his father. It had been taken at some restaurant, probably someone's birthday. They all looked happy, like a real family. When had that been? 5 years ago, 6? When had everything started falling apart? He knew the answer. It had been gradual, not one moment, but 1,000 small moments. Every time he'd chosen work over family. Every time he'd said, "I'll make it up to you," and never did. Every time he'd missed a dinner, a game, a conversation. Small choices that added up to a wasted life. His phone buzzed again. It was a text from his vice president. "Where are you? Board wants to talk." "It's important." David stared at the message. The old him would have jumped up, gotten dressed, rushed to the office. Would have dropped everything because the board wanted to talk. Would have put out this fire like he'd put out 1,000 fires before. He typed back, "I can't make it tonight. We'll talk Monday." The response came immediately. "This can't wait until Monday. This is about your position." David almost laughed. His position. The job he'd sacrificed everything for. The title that had mattered more than his family, more than his health, more than his life. They were probably going to fire him anyway, whether he showed up tonight or Monday. What difference did it make? He typed, "It'll have to wait. I have something more important to deal with." He didn't wait for a response. He turned off his phone completely. Actually powered it down, watching the screen go dark. The silence that followed was almost frightening. When was the last time his phone had been off? When was the last time he'd been unreachable? It felt strange, unsettling, but also kind of free. David went back to the photo albums. He stayed up late into the night looking at every picture, remembering things he'd pushed aside. His daughter learning to swim, his father teaching him to drive, his wedding vows, birthday candles, Christmas mornings, beach trips, ordinary moments that were actually extraordinary because they were filled with people who loved him, people he'd taken for granted. Around midnight, he came across a drawing at the back of one album. It was old, the paper yellowed with age. His daughter had made it when she was maybe 6 or 7, around the same age as the little girl from the cafe. It was a crayon drawing of their family, stick figures holding hands, a house with a triangle roof, a smiling sun. She'd written at the bottom in careful, shaky letters, "My family. I love you, Daddy." David pressed the drawing to his chest and let himself cry again, for the second time in one day, for all the years he'd wasted, for all the moments he could never get back, but also because there was still time. Not much, maybe. His daughter was 16. In 2 years she'd be off to college, but there was still time, Sunday, 6 o'clock. Don't be late, he could do that. He would do that. It was just one dinner, but it was a start. Maybe the start of finding his way back to being human again, being a father again, being someone who deserved the love of the people who'd never stopped loving him. Even when he'd stopped showing up, David fell asleep on his couch that night, surrounded by photo albums, the rainbow drawing from the little girl still in his jacket pocket, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he didn't dream about work. He dreamed about his daughter's smile, about his father's laugh, about a second chance he didn't deserve but was being given anyway. Tomorrow would come, and then Sunday would come, and he would be there, actually there. Not just physically present, but really there, the way he used to be, the way he should have been all along. It was time to show up. Saturday morning came with unexpected sunshine. David woke up on his couch, stiff and uncomfortable, surrounded by photo albums that had fallen onto the floor during the night. For a confused moment, he didn't remember where he was or why he felt so different. Then it all came rushing back. The cafe, the little girl, the phone call with his daughter, the choice he'd made to turn off his phone and ignore work for the first time in 2 decades. He sat up slowly, rubbing his neck. The rainbow drawing had slipped out of his pocket and was lying on the coffee table. He picked it up, smoothing out the wrinkles, and something about seeing it in the morning light made him smile. A real smile, not the professional one he wore in meetings. His phone was still off. He'd plugged it in before falling asleep, but he hadn't turned it back on. Now he stared at it, feeling that familiar pull, the need to check, to see what had happened, to fix whatever problems had piled up overnight. But he didn't reach for it. Not yet. Instead, he made coffee and stood by his kitchen window, watching the city wake up. People walked dogs. A couple jogged past. A father pushed a stroller while holding a toddler's hand. Normal people living normal lives, and for once David didn't feel superior to them. He felt envious. When he finally turned on his phone an hour later, it exploded with notifications. Hundreds of emails, dozens of missed calls, voicemails, text messages. His assistant had sent 15 increasingly frantic messages. The board had apparently tried to reach him all night. His vice president had called 23 times. David scrolled through it all, feeling oddly detached. These messages that would have sent him into a panic yesterday barely registered today. They all felt like noise, just noise compared to what actually mattered. One email caught his attention. It was from the chairman of the board, sent at 2 a.m. The subject line read, "We need to talk, urgent." David opened it. The message was short and direct. The board had met without him. They were concerned about his recent behavior, his declining performance, his absence yesterday. They wanted to schedule a meeting Monday morning to discuss his future with the company. The implication was clear. They were going to push him out. He should have felt panic, fear, anger, something. This was his company, the thing he'd built from nothing. His entire identity was wrapped up in being CEO, being successful, being the person everyone looked up to. But all he felt was tired, and maybe a little relieved. What was the point of fighting for a job that had cost him everything else? What was he really fighting for anymore? He set the phone down without responding and got dressed. Not in a suit this time. Jeans and a sweater he found in the back of his closet. Clothes he'd probably bought years ago and never worn. They felt strange, comfortable in a way he'd forgotten clothes could be. David had a thought. It came to him suddenly, clearly, like something he should have done years ago. He grabbed his jacket and the rainbow drawing and headed out into the sunshine. The cafe looked different in daylight. Brighter, more cheerful. There were families inside, couples reading newspapers, students with laptops. David ordered a coffee and sat at the same corner table from yesterday. He didn't know why he'd come back. Maybe he was hoping the little girl would be here again. Maybe he just needed to be in the place where things had started to change. She wasn't there, of course. What were the odds? But as David sat with his coffee, actually tasting it this time instead of just drinking it automatically, he realized it didn't matter. The little girl had already given him what he needed. A wake-up call. A reminder that kindness existed. A reason to look at his life honestly. He pulled out his phone and found his sister's number. They hadn't spoken since the funeral. She'd sent him a few texts over the months, short messages checking in, but he'd never replied with more than a word or two. Too busy, too focused on work, too ashamed to face her disappointment. Now he called her. His heart pounded as it rang. What if she didn't answer? What if she was done with him too?
Hello?
Her voice was cautious, surprised. He didn't blame her. "Hey," he said. "It's me, I know." Your name came up. A pause. "Is everything okay?" "No," he said honestly. "Everything's not okay, but I'm trying to fix it. Or at least I'm trying to try." He heard her move, probably sitting down. "What happened?" So he told her. About the divorce being finalized. About sitting in the cafe feeling like his life was over. About the little girl who'd asked if he was okay. About calling his daughter and being invited to dinner tomorrow. About turning off his phone and looking at old photos and realizing how much he'd lost. His sister listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I've been waiting for this call for a year," she finally said. Her voice was thick with emotion. "I kept hoping you'd wake up. That losing Dad would shake you out of whatever you'd become, but you just buried yourself deeper in work." "I know, I'm sorry. Dad asked about you," she said. "Even at the end, even when he could barely talk, he kept asking when you were coming to visit. He made excuses for you, said you were busy, that you were doing important things. He was proud of you right up until the end, even though you never showed up." David's throat tightened. "I can't take that back. I can't fix it." "No, you can't," she sighed. "But you can do better going forward. That's all any of us can do." "I want to," he said. "I don't know how yet, but I want to. Start by showing up for dinner tomorrow. Your daughter needs you. She's been hurting for so long." "I will. I promise I will." Another pause. Then his sister said something that surprised him. "You know, I'm proud of you for making this call. I know it's not easy. Admitting you were wrong, trying to change. That takes courage. I don't feel very courageous. I feel like I've wasted 20 years of my life chasing something that doesn't matter." "It's not wasted if you learn from it," she said. "And you still have time. Not as much as you wish you had, but time." They talked for another hour. Really talked, the way they used to when they were kids. She told him about her life, her job, her kids, his nieces and nephews who he barely knew. He'd missed their birthdays, their school plays, their soccer games. She'd stopped inviting him to things years ago because he never showed up. "Maybe I could come visit sometime," he said tentatively. "Meet the kids properly. Be an uncle instead of just a name they hear occasionally." "They'd like that," she said. "I'd like that too." When they hung up, David felt lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying rocks in his pockets and had finally started taking them out. He wasn't fixed. He wasn't suddenly a better person. But he was taking steps. Small ones, but steps. He spent the rest of Saturday doing things he hadn't done in years. He went to a bookstore and browsed, not looking for business books or industry reports, just reading whatever caught his eye. He bought a novel, something light and funny, because when was the last time he'd read for pleasure? He walked through a park and watched kids play. Saw fathers pushing daughters on swings. Saw families having picnics. Saw what life looked like when you actually lived it instead of just rushing through it. He stopped at a flower shop. The woman behind the counter smiled at him, and he realized he must look different. Less severe, maybe. More human. "Can I help you find something?" "I need flowers for a dinner," he said. "For my ex-wife. And something else for my daughter." "She's 16. The woman's smile widened. "Roses are classic for an apology. And for your daughter." She moved through the shop, pulling together a bouquet. "Sunflowers. They're bright and happy. Young people like them." David watched her work, the careful way she selected each flower, the thought she put into the arrangement. When was the last time he'd put this much thought into something that wasn't work-related? "These are beautiful," he said when she finished. "Thank you. Special occasion. You could say that. I'm trying to fix some things I broke." She nodded knowingly, like she'd heard this before. "Well, flowers are a good start. But you know what really matters?" "What? Showing up?" "Being there. Anyone can buy flowers. Not everyone can show up and mean it." David left the shop with the flowers carefully wrapped. The woman's words stayed with him. Show up and mean it. That's what his daughter had said too. Just show up, he could do that. He had to do that. That evening he did something else he hadn't done in forever. He called a few old friends, people he'd lost touch with over the years. Most didn't answer, probably didn't recognize his number anymore or were too busy or had given up on him. But one did, his college roommate, someone he hadn't talked to in almost 5 years. "David, is this really you?" "Yeah, it's me. I know it's been a while." "A while? Man, I thought you'd fallen off the planet. Every time I called, you were in a meeting or traveling or something." "I was. Too much, all the time." David leaned back against his couch. "I'm sorry I disappeared. What's going on? Are you okay?" So David told the story again. And his friend listened, really listened, the way friends do when they actually care. "You know what's weird?" his friend said when David finished. "I always thought you had it all figured out. Big shot CEO, making millions, running a company. I was jealous, honestly." "Don't be," David said. "I have money, but I don't have much else. My family's gone. I don't know who I am outside of work. I'm not sure that's a fair trade. It's not too late though, right? You've got dinner tomorrow. That's something. If I don't mess it up, you won't. You know why? Because you're actually scared of messing it up. The old you, the you from 5 years ago, probably wouldn't have been scared, wouldn't have cared enough to be scared. The fact that you're nervous means you've changed already." David hadn't thought about it that way. Maybe his friend was right. Maybe the fact that he was lying awake worrying about tomorrow, planning what to say, desperate not to disappoint his daughter again, maybe that meant something. That night he laid out his clothes for the next day. Not a suit, casual but nice. He wrote down things he wanted to say to his daughter, then threw the paper away because it felt too rehearsed. He had to just speak from his heart, say what he felt even if it came out wrong. He looked at the rainbow drawing one more time before going to bed. That little girl had no idea what she'd started. One small act of kindness from a stranger had cracked something open inside him, had given him permission to feel again. To be human again, tomorrow was Sunday. Tomorrow was 6 o'clock. Tomorrow was his chance to start over. David set 3 alarms on his phone even though he knew he wouldn't need them. There was no way he was oversleeping. No way he was missing this. He fell asleep thinking about his daughter, about the little girl she used to be, running to hug him when he came home, about the young woman she was now, giving him one more chance he didn't deserve, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, he could be the father she needed him to be. The flowers sat on his kitchen counter, bright and hopeful in the darkness. Tomorrow would come, and when it did, David would be ready. Not perfect, not fixed, but present, finally truly present, and sometimes that's all we can offer. Sometimes showing up is the bravest thing we can do. Sunday arrived with a gentle rain, the kind that washes everything clean. David was awake before his first alarm even went off. He'd barely slept, his mind racing with 1,000 thoughts about what he'd say, how he'd act, whether his daughter would even want him there once he showed up. He got up and made breakfast, something he never did. Usually he just grabbed coffee and maybe a protein bar on his way out the door. But today he made eggs and toast, sat at his table and ate slowly. The apartment felt different. Quieter maybe, but in a good way, less empty. The flowers were still fresh on the counter. He'd kept them in water overnight, and the sunflowers seemed even brighter this morning. Looking at them made him nervous and hopeful at the same time. David spent the morning trying to distract himself. He read a few chapters of the book he'd bought. He cleaned his apartment, something he usually paid someone else to do. He found more old photos tucked in drawers and spent time really looking at them, at the faces of the people he'd taken for granted. Around 3 o'clock, his phone rang. His heart jumped. Was his daughter calling to cancel? To tell him not to come after all? But it was his ex-wife. He answered carefully. Hello. Hi. Her voice was neutral, hard to read. I heard you're coming to dinner tonight. Yeah, if that's still okay. There was a pause. She's nervous. Just so you know. She's been cleaning her room all morning, which she never does. She changed her outfit 3 times. David felt his chest tighten. I'm nervous too. Good, his ex-wife said, and there was something almost soft in her voice. You should be. This matters, David, to her. A lot, I know. I'm not going to mess this up. I hope not. Another pause. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for her. She needs her father. She's always needed her father. I just hope you're finally ready to be one. The words stung, but they were fair. I am, or I'm going to try my best to be. We'll see. But she didn't sound angry, just tired. Come at 6. Don't be early, don't be late. Just 6. I'll be there. After she hung up, David sat with the phone in his hand. His ex-wife had every right to doubt him. He'd given her 1,000 reasons to. But knowing his daughter was nervous, that she cared enough to change her outfit 3 times, that gave him hope. She still wanted this to work. She was giving him a chance, he couldn't waste it. At 4:30, David started getting ready. He showered and shaved carefully, put on the casual clothes he'd laid out, dark jeans and a nice button-down shirt. Not too formal, not too casual. He wanted to look like he'd made an effort, but not like he was trying too hard. He looked at himself in the mirror. He still looked tired, older than his years. But there was something different in his eyes, something that hadn't been there a week ago. Life, maybe. Hope. At 5:15, he picked up the flowers and headed to his car. Then he stopped. His car was a luxury sedan, the kind that screamed money and success. Suddenly it felt wrong, like he'd be showing up in armor instead of as himself. So he left the car and called a regular taxi instead. The driver was an older man who talked about the weather and the traffic and his grandkids. David found himself actually listening, actually asking questions. The man showed him a picture of his granddaughter on his phone. She was about 7, with a gap-toothed smile that reminded David of the little girl from the cafe. She's beautiful, David said. She's my world, the driver said proudly. I pick her up from school twice a week. We get ice cream and talk about her day. Best part of my week every week. David thought about all the times he could have picked his daughter up from school, all the ice cream conversations he'd missed. You're lucky, he said. I am. But it's not luck, really. It's choice. I could work more hours, make more money. But what's money compared to watching her grow up? The driver glanced at him in the mirror. You got kids? A daughter, 16. The tough years. But they grow up so fast. Don't blink. I already did, David said quietly. I blinked and missed most of it. The driver nodded like he understood. Well, you still got time. Not as much as you wish, but time. They pulled up to the house, his old house, at exactly 5:58. David paid the fare and added a large tip. Thanks for the talk. Good luck with your daughter, the driver said with a knowing smile. David stood on the sidewalk looking at the house he'd lived in for 12 years. It looked the same, but different. The garden was better maintained than when he'd lived there. There were new flowers in the beds. A wind chime hung on the porch that hadn't been there before. His ex-wife had made it a home in a way he never had. He'd just used it as a place to sleep between work. His hands were shaking as he walked up the path. He could see lights on inside, could smell something cooking. It smelled like home, like family dinners he'd missed hundreds of times. He rang the doorbell at exactly 6 o'clock. Footsteps inside. The door opened. His ex-wife stood there looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. She'd aged too, but gracefully. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there when they'd married. But she looked happier somehow. Lighter. You're on time, she said. I said I would be. She looked at the flowers in his hands. Those are nice. These are for you, he said, offering the roses. And these are for her, holding up the sunflowers. I know flowers don't fix anything, but I wanted to bring something. His ex-wife took the roses, and for just a second, something softened in her face. Come in. The house smelled like roasted chicken and herbs. Music played softly from somewhere. David stepped inside, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. She's in her room, his ex-wife said. She knows you're here, just be patient with her, okay? This is hard for her too. I will. I promise. His ex-wife touched his arm briefly. I meant what I said on the phone. I hope you're ready for this. She can't take being disappointed again. I know. I'm ready, or as ready as I can be. She nodded and went to the kitchen, leaving him standing in the entryway. David looked around at the familiar space that felt so foreign now. There were new pictures on the walls. His daughter at different ages doing things he hadn't been there for. School photos, sports pictures, art projects. A life he'd missed while he was busy working. Then he heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, hesitant. He turned, and there she was. His daughter stood on the bottom step looking at him with an expression caught between hope and fear. She'd gotten so tall. When had that happened? Her hair was longer than he remembered. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, and she looked so much like her mother it made his heart ache. Hi, sweetheart, he managed to say. Hi, Dad. Her voice was small, careful. He held out the sunflowers. These are for you. She came down the last step and took them, smelling the flowers. They're pretty. Thank you. They stood there awkwardly, neither knowing quite what to do. Hug? Shake hands? The distance between them felt like miles, even though it was only a few feet. You came, she said finally. Of course I came. I said I would. I know, but... She trailed off, and he knew what she meant. He'd said he would before. Many times before. I'm here, he said. Really here. Not thinking about work. Not planning to leave early. Not distracted. Just here. She studied his face like she was trying to decide if she could believe him. Finally, she nodded. Okay, dinner's almost ready. Do you want to help me set the table? It was such a simple thing, setting a table. But the fact that she'd asked him, that she wanted him to help, felt like a gift. I'd like that. They worked side by side in the kitchen, pulling out plates and silverware. His ex-wife was at the stove, and she watched them with a careful expression. David's daughter showed him where things were kept. Even though he should have known, he'd lived here for years. But everything had been rearranged, organized in a way that made more sense. We usually eat in the dining room now, his daughter said. Mom says it's nicer than the kitchen. David remembered how he'd always eaten at the kitchen counter when he was home, usually standing up, always in a hurry. He'd never made time to sit at the dining room table, to eat like a family. They carried the food in together. Roasted chicken, vegetables, salad, bread. His ex-wife had made a real meal, the kind that took time and care. David felt a wave of gratitude that she'd done this, that she was giving him this chance. They sat down together, the three of them. It felt strange and familiar at the same time. How many family dinners had they missed? How many nights had this table sat empty because he was working late? This looks amazing, David said. "Thank you for cooking," his ex-wife nodded. "You're welcome." For a moment, nobody knew quite how to start. The silence stretched out, not quite comfortable but not hostile either. Then his daughter spoke up. "So, how have you been?" David could have said fine, could have given some automatic answer and kept everything surface level. But he'd promised himself he'd be honest. "Really honest, not great actually," he said. "The last few months have been really hard. I've been forcing myself to realize a lot of things I didn't want to see. About myself, about my choices, about what I've lost." His daughter looked surprised at his honesty. "Like what?" "Like the fact that I've been a terrible father. That I let work become more important than you, than this family. That I missed so many moments I can never get back." He looked directly at her. "I missed your piano recital." "I know I did. And I'm so sorry." Tears welled up in her eyes. "You remembered. Your mom told me. But I should have remembered on my own. I should have been there. Why weren't you?" The question was soft, but it carried weight. What was so important that you couldn't come? David thought back to that day. What had he been doing? Some meeting, some call, something that seemed urgent at the time but that he couldn't even remember now. "Nothing," he said. "Nothing was that important. I told myself it was, but it wasn't. I was wrong." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I worked so hard on that piece. I practiced every day for months. And I kept looking for you in the audience. I kept thinking maybe you'd surprise me. But you never came, I know. And I can't take that back. I can't fix it." David's own eyes were burning now. "But I'm here now. And I want to be here for the next thing. And the thing after that. I want to show up." His daughter wiped her eyes. "What changed?" "Why now?" He thought about the little girl at the cafe. About the rainbow drawing in his pocket. About sitting alone in the rain and realizing his life had gone completely off track. "I had a wake-up call. Someone reminded me what actually matters. And I realized I was about to lose everything that was real." His ex-wife had been quiet, but now she spoke. "Are you going to keep your job?" "I don't know," David said honestly. "They might fire me anyway. But even if they don't, I don't think I can keep doing what I was doing. Working 80 hours a week. Missing everything important. Living like work is the only thing that exists. That's not living. That's just existing. What will you do?" His daughter asked. "I don't know yet. But I'll figure it out. And whatever I do, I'm going to make sure I have time for the people who matter. For you?" He looked at both of them. "I know I can't fix the past. I know I've hurt you both in ways that one dinner can't heal. But I want to try. If you'll let me, I want to be part of this family again. Not like before, but better. Actually present. Actually here." His daughter looked at her mother, some silent communication passing between them. Then she looked back at David. "It's going to take time," she said. "I can't just forgive everything because you showed up for one dinner. I know. I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking for the chance to prove that I mean it. To show you through actions, not just words." She nodded slowly. "Okay, we can try." Those 3 words, "we can try," felt like the most precious gift David had ever received. Not a guarantee, not forgiveness, just a chance. And that was more than he deserved. They started eating, and slowly, carefully, they started talking. Real talking. His daughter told him about school, about her friends, about the things she was interested in. He listened to every word, asking questions, genuinely curious. His ex-wife shared stories too, and David learned about the life they'd been living without him. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments and painful silences, but it was real. It was a beginning. And for the first time in years, David felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be.